Welcome, good people of the audience, to this session organised jointly by the Commission, DG Research and Innovation and DG Environment. My name is Katrina Sickle. I have the privilege of moderating us all through the next 60 minutes, and you can already see that I am joined by my speakers. I'm not going to introduce everybody right now, just in the interest of time, so kindly bear with me. But suffice to say, and I think they will agree, that despite us not being able to see you or hear you, we are really, really delighted that you chose to come to this session after your lunch, Safe and Sustainable by Design, from greenwashing to competitive advantage. Now, what do we mean by safe and sustainable by design? Well, it's not for me to go into the ins and outs, but the top line is it's a pre-market design approach where the objectives of minimizing the use of hazardous chemicals, of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and of course, importantly, fostering the reuse and recycling of materials within a circular economy are built into the product design. So it is included in the chemical strategy for sustainability. It's a very important component for achieving the zero pollution ambition. This is the theme of this year's Green Week, but the Commission is actually in the early stages of developing criteria for safe and sustainable by design, not just to ensure this safety all along the value chain, because that is absolutely critical, but also more broadly, as I said in the title, to combat greenwashing. Sounds good, but the question is, how can this be achieved in a realistic time frame while supporting industry? There are costs involved, the competitiveness of EU industry as a whole, and bringing companies and citizens along for the ride. The experts I have with me, an academic, in fact, you can wave, Klaus, if you like. I mean, there you go, if you would like to know who I'm referring to. A designer, there is Barbara Pellini, and also a frontrunner enterprise. We'll find out more about them, as well as representatives from the Commission will unpack all of this in a lot more detail. So their aim is to offer you their thoughts, their expertise, their concerns and their solutions that can support the EU's journey towards zero pollution and, of course, its ambitious climate goals. Time is limited. We will endeavour, ladies and gentlemen, to take 3 questions, put them in Slido, they will be filtered and sent to me in the private chat of Zoom, and I'll come to those towards the end. My biggest request is, of course, keep them super short and say to whom your question or comment is addressed. Right, and of course, the one other thing to remind you is you can make your voice heard at any time, hashtag EU Green Week 2021. Time to get stuck in. We need to frame the discussions. So first, let's hear from the Commission, their understanding of the objectives for safe and sustainable by design, and how do the upcoming actions support the EU's overall climate neutrality and zero pollution ambition. So I'm going to turn first to Kęstutis Sadauskas. He is Director for Circular Economy and Green Growth at DG Environment. So I'm going to hand the floor to you and help kind of put some meat on the bones there, if I may ask, and help to frame our discussions in this session. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Katrina, and welcome to this panel on Safe and Sustainable by Design. I promise that you will not regret having joined this very interesting and very informative panel, because you will hear a lot of interesting things. You may ask what Safe and Sustainable by Design has to do with the Green Week theme, zero pollution. It is linked to European Green Deal that launched European ambition towards an environment with zero pollution. And one of the first things that the Commission delivered in this context was a chemical strategy for sustainability. In that strategy, we define a vision and a pathway to move towards a toxic-free environment where we produce and use chemicals in such a way that they contribute to society, but they avoid harm to people and to the planet. To achieve our goal of a toxic-free environment and zero pollution, we have a double approach. We need to phase out harmful chemicals, especially in the consumer products, and we need the new chemicals, products, and materials to be safe and sustainable by design. In other words, we want to promote a virtuous circle between prevention, protection, and innovation, and to catalyze a shift towards chemicals, materials, and products that are safe and sustainable by design along their entire life cycle and in the waste stream. As chemicals are building blocks of all materials, this shift is fundamental not only for achieving the EU's zero pollution ambition, but also for moving towards climate neutrality and circular economy. This will require joint effort of all societal and economic stakeholders. There are many players in this field whose role will be crucial, not only the chemicals industry, but also its entire value chain. Not only the current generation of chemists, but also the upcoming generation of chemistry and design students. Not only designers of chemicals, but also designers of materials and products. The purpose is to improve the durability and reusability of products, increase energy and resource efficiency without the use of hazardous chemicals. This transition is fundamental, not only to achieve zero pollution ambition, but also to make our economy and society sustainable. It sounds like a tall order. However, today's panelists will give you examples on how this can be done. So this will be a great session, and that's why you won't regret having joined. Thank you.
Thank you. You could sell, how do you say, you could sell ice cream to Eskimos. That's what I would say. No, they will not regret it. No stress to our lovely panelists. And I think just to echo, that's the point, that we have Klaus and Marlies and Barbara, who I will introduce in more detail in a moment, precisely because they represent a proportion of those many actors that Kęstutis just referred to. And let me move directly now on to your colleague, who is of course at DG Research and Innovation, where he is Head of Industrial Transformation. His name is Jürgen Tiedje, and can you complement what we heard there and expand a little bit on the vision, on where we're at the moment, and on what we heard there from your colleague at DG Environment? Thank you.
Katrina, good afternoon. Good afternoon to everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here as well. I'm looking forward to a fascinating debate. Kęstutis was just referring to a tall order. So if it comes to terms like tall order, you need the researchers and innovators. I think that's why we're here. The world we want to work on is on a pathway. Kęstutis was just setting out the vision, and I think DG Environment is really the driving force, and very, very happy that they really took the lead. We are coming more on the pathway, and here we speak about yardsticks or guardrails. No, we speak about life cycle. Life cycle. How can we have in future chemicals, but then also materials, products, and think in terms of life cycles, and consider at the end they are safe and sustainable by design. And the pathway is not here something just for political masters. It is very important also that we bring all the communities along to understand where we are going, and we need a set of criteria to which Kęstutis already was referring to. Criteria should help you to judge and to clarify, because what we would like to achieve at the end is, as I said, not only phasing out harmful chemicals, but the world of new chemicals. And that brings us to the world of design. Reducing time for research and development. What about reducing costs for innovation? What about preparing for future regulatory challenges? A better consumer acceptance, what we are looking for. This is our path where we would like to contribute. We are not yet there, otherwise we could close the session immediately. We are just starting it. So we had together with the colleagues in DG Environment a huge workshop, 600 people in March. And we are actually launching this week a survey, and I hope one of my colleagues will put in the link of the survey into the chat box here, because it's an invitation actually for the community at large to engage with us, to come back on very specific questions, because we are at the beginning. And at the end, hopefully next year, we should have a skeleton of criteria, what we understand by safe and sustainable by design. So I'm very grateful that this is actually a fantastic adventure. We even can announce the survey. So many thanks, Katrina, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And indeed, if you need the link to that survey, then perhaps you could post that link in the chat, or the technicians behind can let me know how I can let the audience know how they can find that.
It will
Perfect. Now I'm going to let you two gentlemen listen behind the scenes or get on with the various challenges that are allied with your day jobs, but we have other colleagues from the Commission who are definitely also listening in behind the scenes. But I thank you very, very much for framing these discussions so concisely. All right, let's see, tall order. If it is a tall order, how do we get there? Let me introduce now Klaus Kummerer. He is Director of the Institute of Sustainable and Environmental Chemistry. He holds the Chair of Sustainable Chemistry and Material Resources there at the Faculty of Sustainability at the Leuphana University in Lüneburg in Germany. And he is also Director for Research and Education at the International Sustainable Chemistry Collaborative Centre in Bonn. So he's very much coming from that scientific, that researcher perspective, but also more, and has got some brilliant insights to give us, and also about his own journey to this point and his interest. We have with us Barbara Pellini. There you go. You can wave so we know. There you go, or I'll wave to you, Barbara. Yep, she is a designer. She's an educator too. She's also a researcher, professor of sustainable design at NABA Design University in Milan. But she's also co-founder and designer for a collective called NUP or NUP. Forgive me, you can correct me when you start to present, Sustainable Creativity. And she's also a PhD candidate at the Polytechnic University of Milan, researching biofabricated materials for design. Important for me to tell you all those elements because they're all really, you know, intertwined in the way she works and her approach. So it's important you understand her background. And we also have here Marlies van Weijer. She is CEO of the Royal Van Weijer Werf, a family business based in the Netherlands. It's got more than 100 years of history producing paint and paint-related products and is, I think, you can nod if I'm correct, Marlies, the third largest decorative paint producer in the Netherlands. Is that correct? Right. Your sister is the corporate marketing manager. My God, I commend you for that. No sibling rivalry, just good sibling cooperation. And you have previously earned a title Businesswoman of the Year, particularly because, and this is important to say in the context of these discussions, your commitment to sustainability and innovation. So in the interest of time, I'm going to start with each of you. I'm going to start with Klaus. I'm going to say the super short introduction as to who you are and how your work resonates with this topic under discussion, and the main components of that safe and sustainable by design concept, taking the lead from what you heard there from the Commission. So Klaus, I'm going to mute and I'm going to give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Katrina, and thank you for the invitation and giving the opportunity to share some of my experience and thoughts. Originally, my background was environmental chemistry, but then after years, I became interested in solutions, not just in assessing what's out there and what are the challenges, but what are solutions. And as for the time being, then I started also research in time and environmental science and sustainability. And I served in committees and still serve, including EU technology platform SASCHEM Europe. And since recently, I was appointed high-level roundtable of chemical strategy for sustainability for the European Union. And I'm glad about this because that really allows me to move things forward from academia more into practice. Katrina, you're muted.
It's so rare. I'm normally telling everybody else they're muted. Thank you, because I've been expecting you to continue. I think it's very interesting what you say, that you're moving to solutions. It's not just the research. You're coming out of that academic world. So let me say with you, before I come to our other two expert guests, within the context what you heard there from the Commission, some people need a bit of clarity around this concept, safe and sustainable by design. So how do you explain it? What are the key components?
For me, sustainable by design is a central building block of sustainable chemistry. And sustainable chemistry is more than chemistry and chemical products. It's the system thinking approach, going far beyond substitution of individual chemicals. It's about ethics in the extreme, also included new business models, new business opportunities. And this thinking starts with asking for service and function before asking, I have a chemical, for what can it be used? First, think about what is the service we need and we want to have. And then the next step is think about how you can design the whole system, not just the chemical, the whole system of its application. For example, maybe a better construction allows you to go without a specific chemical or with less chemicals or a different service. And I say it's more about sell knowledge instead tonnage. That's the future. And it's not supply driven, it has to be demand driven. And this also relates that we have to simplify, and we can simplify substance and material flow and product flows at all scales and levels in order to be able to come up successfully with a circular economy.
I think it's very interesting. And the point I just want to pick up, not least that you said, listen, it's service first, function first, not I have this, what can I do with it? Because we heard from the Commission, this is also about contribution to society without harming people or the planet. But also very critically, I heard, Katrina, it's not about just substitution. It takes a hell of a lot of energy to think about, right, it's tweaking, it's a longer value chain, it's where it's not just about going, oh, that's hazardous, so I'll just dump that one in. It's much wider than that. It's about system thinking. Barbara, I think this system thinking, if I caught this from you, does resonate with you. So same question, tell me just a little bit about yourself in relation to the topic under discussion. And for you, how do you sort of explain to those who may know less about this, the key concepts of safe and sustainable by design?
So thank you, Katrina. And first of all, good afternoon, everyone. And of course, it's an honor to be here in this context with these guests to talk about such important topics that for me are really important. So, okay, I am a designer, an educator, a researcher, because since 2010, I completed a course of study in eco-design and eco-innovation for the University of Camerino in Italy. And since then, I am a designer and consultant for the international collective NOOP Sustainable Creativity. As a designer, my approach is based on life cycle design. So rather than look into the detail of products, I always start understanding the whole life cycle, trying to anticipate the impact results or may results from my design choices. So in my opinion, I agree with you that this systemic thinking is the only tool for designer to address the social and environmental complexity that today we are facing behind projects. For the same reason, I share this approach, this design approach with my students in NABA Design University in Milan. There I'm teaching since 2012 sustainable design and sustainable selection of material for design. So I also address in particular circular materials, material design, and redesign of regular product in a sustainable way. But I also address, for example, speculative design to pose what-if scenarios directed to a more sustainable future, because in my opinion, designers also need in first place to imagine new sustainable futures. In my research activity, instead, I have a particular aptitude to look into little signal for possible sustainable solution in the future. So for this reason, since 2014, I fall in love with biofabricated material, meaning material made from or with living organisms. And this is also the topic of my PhD research path that I'm having at Polytechnic University in Milan, supervised by Valentina Rognoli. And well, to answer your question,
just to reiterate the question, just to have give the audience just another in, and Marlies, I will come to you in just a moment. Yeah, just to hear for you what what resonated with what you heard. What is, in short, the concept for you?
So for me, safe and sustainable by design in my daily work is carried out through this systemic approach on the project, and I always try to have a deep understanding of processes and material flow to avoid unnecessary or unexpected impacts on the future of production design today. Moreover, I believe that it's no longer enough to be just inspired by nature or to implement natural material inside our production, but I really think that we need to learn how to collaborate with other species and within our environment. So actually also the research I'm conducting is based on this final goal.
Thank you. Super interesting there. And I think this idea of speculative design, you've got to look forward, you've got to look ahead, is super interesting. And what you said there clearly, I'm really focused on the life cycle. It's not just one bit of it, which is what echoes with what Klaus was saying, and the impacts of your choice. So let's hear from Marlies, because you really are coming from the industry side. This is quite a big deal to get this into a value chain, I think, and where you sit. Now, you are a family business. What do you think? Speculative design, this world of color. Tell us a little bit about you and how you understand from that specific perspective of a business, this safe and sustainable by design. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Katrina. And of course, welcome to all the listeners this afternoon. Yeah, as you told the audience, I'm the CEO of Royal Van Weijenverf. As a young girl, actually, I wanted to be a biologist, but later on I decided to study business administration and joined the family business. Now I'm fourth generation, and our main activity is developing, producing and selling decorative paints in the Netherlands, but also abroad. And I compete with the Akzo Nobels and the PPGs. So I compete with the largest paint producers in the world, which is a real challenge, I can tell you. For me, innovation and sustainability are not only important, but they go hand in hand. So what does sustainable by design mean for me in my daily life? Well, we are downstream users of chemicals. So chemicals are the raw materials which I need to make my products. The function of paints and coatings is not only to make things nice and colorful, but also to protect the substrate that is applied on. It's a very important feature. We, as a company, absolutely support the green goals. It's important for the future of the planet and the survival of humans in general. And I think that if you are not sustainable as a company, I'm sure there will be no future for you whatsoever, for any company. And I do want to take that family business into the 5th generation. So a lot of work has to be done. And I need the company to keep healthy as well. So I want to be sustainable and need to make profits to fund the innovations that are needed. A nice example is maybe that we started in 2012 to be the first one in the Netherlands to launch a bio-based wall paint. And the word bio-based wasn't even known by then. I had to explain that it was based on renewable materials. Another important thing is to focus on your employees, get them enthusiastic to work towards the green goals. You need their support. We are a B Corp, a benefit corporation since 2016. It is a sustainability management system, and I think the well-known Ben & Jerry's famous ice cream is one of the famous B Corps in the world, but it helps you to get sustainability better in the company. And I also have a green team that are young employees in my company that help me to get the DNA, sustainability DNA more into the company. And they organize a lot of nice things like contests, sustainable contests, green lunches, etc. I could tell a lot about it, but not now, don't worry. So there are many new challenges to become Green Deal ready. And my R&D manager told me recently that approximately 80% of our raw materials that we know will be replaced by the safe by design materials. That can be biodegradable, circular, and probably bio-based, but not per definition. Bio is not always green, actually, we found out. But my main message is that we have to start fresh and we have to learn how to make paint again. And that is a real challenge.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Barbara was nodding there when you said bio is not always green. That's what we learned, indeed. Yes, and perhaps we can just unpack that a little bit more when I come back to you. But no doubt, I mean, just when you're saying it's silly, you know, there's us thinking you slap a paint on a wall, is that a nice color, does it go with the wardrobe? And you're saying, hang on a minute, you've got to protect the substrate underneath the paint. But I think what's really interesting is in a way what you're sort of saying, we're almost starting from scratch. So interesting that it's you at this point in the history of a family business that has this particular task, this challenge on your plate. You know, it's not your great grandfather, it's not, you know, it's you and your sister. So Klaus, let me come back to you just to try and keep this balanced. I have 3 questions for Klaus, Barbara and Marlies, and I'd like to hear from all of you in as punchy a way as we can to hear your differing thoughts, your overlapping opinions, and then to see if there's anything that comes in from our audience towards the end. Of course, the obvious, you touched a whiff, you used the word challenge there, Marlies, but what are the main 2 or 3 challenges for the implementation of safe and sustainable by design? Any thoughts on how we could address them? How do we keep that competitivity on the global market? Is safe and sustainable by design, does it enable companies, researchers, scientists, companies to use specific tools to be more competitive, or what does it take to get there? And implementing this, we heard it already, you spoke of young people, Klaus, you also did. This is passing on a torch. It's got to be as quick as possible, personally speaking. How do we keep people thinking in that way? Because God knows it's also changing prevailing mindsets. So we'll take them one at a time. First of all, for each of you, Klaus, what are the main challenges? And what would be your opinion on addressing a couple of those?
First of all, I would say, yes, there are challenges, but most often there are opportunities. If you have a longer time where you look upon what comes across you, you see it's a challenge, but in the end, it's often an opportunity. And I think this change in thinking is already one of the first challenges, because normally we all hesitate to change something. But if we see opportunities, we are motivated. So the major challenge is the conventional thinking in chemistry, both science and industrial sector, and being focused on chemistry only as well the dominance of growth-based economy, be it circular or not. Circular is not sustainable per se, the same as has already been said as for green. And accepting the new limits is important to overcome it, and we need a different understanding, which is, for example, enclosed in sustainable chemistry. And we need, again, as I said, system thinking. And there are already many highly motivated people, including young chemists, and these we have to motivate. Then we can overcome the challenge. And we have not just to improve we also have to improve the cooperation along the whole, I underline the whole life cycle, not just the producers or the manufacturers and the end users, all of them. And that's important. And also, as I'm glad that it's already been said, it's not just about the value chain, because the value chain ends where there is no value, but where the value depends on us and our economies. So the full life cycle is important.
And just before I come to your colleagues there, just let me go back one step. You said, well, I'm about to say you said, Katrina, you weren't obviously addressing me alone, but you said, this growth-based circular or non-circular, we need to get away from that. What do you mean the growth-based circular? What are you?
Yeah, I'm a bit afraid that we now are saying, yes, we have a circular economy. But again, it's about more economic growth. It's about growth coming up with more products. Yes, we can circulate. That's fine. That's not an issue. No, that's not true. Everything we circulate needs energy, needs resources, recycling the same. So we really have to be more humble in this respect too. We have to simplify these circles. We have to reduce them in terms of diversity, in terms of dynamics, etc.
Okay, thank you. That's a good. So for those of you who are tweeting, #EU GreenWeek 2021, I like that. We have to be more humble. So even within this circular economy and all of the efforts that are going towards reaching targets, bringing it about more systemically, hang on a second, have a think, this growth-based drive, we need to be more humble. So let me just come to Barbara now. And also you said you might want to in one of the challenges, as we heard, their bio is not always green. So even for those who are having to put this for industry into practice, I know that data is one of your things, but that information is clearly critical. Does that feature in a challenge for you? Tell us more.
So actually, I'm going to answer addressing 3 main key topics. The first one is maybe also an answer to what was saying Klaus. Actually, it's true that the circular economy is well known and well debated, but still little performed. And sometimes we have wrong ideas about that. It's also a lot about reducing, not just making things circulate. And so there is the need to push for circular and systemic design and to make concept like, for example, industrial symbiosis, which still are very hard to be achieved, are reality. Well, secondly, knowledge is the key. So here I'm going to answer to Marlies, because only in front of an LCA, a performed LCA, we can discover if a bio-based material is more sustainable than an oil-based material, because everything is related to the functional unit of the object, and only data can give us this amount of information that make us sure of what we guess. Actually, in my profession, I think knowledge is the key, because I see that little companies and designers struggle to have access to trustable data and perform LCA. So I think that create a user-friendly and free tool to even share EU production environmental data would benefit both the local market and also the awareness of companies and designers. I have one example here to quote is the HIC index by Apparel Coalition. This coalition is made of brands, retailer, manufacturer, even academics, working around the supply chain of apparel, which is super complex and polluting. So basically they are working together to find sustainable solution and design strategies, but they are also sharing tools and data to support their design choices. And the last answer, last but not least, biology has given us a systemic reinterpretation of our species. So we know that our survival depends on an environment rich in biodiversity and abundant resources able to regenerate. And for this reason, I trust very much, and I have open biotechnologies as a key for sustainable future production. But there is a but. I'm also worried that if we address this radical solution with the same mechanicistic approach that fueled our linear economy, we risk to compromise the intrinsic sustainable potential of such emerging field. So I really claim for behavioral change, both of industry and citizen, as a key component of this transition.
Yeah, thank you. And I hear the same kind of words of caution there from you and from Klaus. Let's come to Marlies, because the starting point, I think, for you when I ask challenges, and then don't forget to my lovely three of you, I have two other questions and we will try and fit in from the floor. You said, you know, according to your R&D manager, around 80% of the raw materials will be replaced. You have to reinvent yourself. So talk to us when everybody says, come on, we can do these changes, and, you know, industry, it's all about making money, and they don't have a social conscience and they don't have enough of an environmental conscience. What would you want to explain as a challenge?
Well, to set the scene a little bit, we calculated for our company our CO2 emissions, and we found out that 90%, so 90% of that we cannot influence, as it is caused by our suppliers. So carbon neutral for us, for instance, would be a big challenge, number one. We need the right raw materials. So we are very dependent on the suppliers and the chemical industry to get these safe by design chemicals. The challenge here is, for instance, we and solvent-based products. Regulation made water-based products favorable over solvent-based paints in the past. But remember that waterborne paints means that they have acrylates. Acrylates are microplastics, and they need preservation. That is protection against bacteria or fungi. All water-based products need that. So you need MIT, CIT, BIT, and they are harmful as a harmful chemical, and they will also be forbidden in 2 years' time. So what to do then? We just introduced our new bio-based wall paint. It has a large percentage of bio, but there's still an acrylate in there. So it also contains microplastics. So we have to solve that particular thing. And it is even more complex because solvent-based lacquers are very bio-based by design, but they have solvents in them. And now you can use turpentine made from oil derivatives. You can use turpentine from trees. And I can tell you one thing, the turpentine from the trees is more harmful than the turpentine oil derivatives. So it's not that easy to substitute something like that. Of course, we are now looking for safer solvents, but that's a longer way to go. And we can only start with developing new paints if the raw materials are ready. And I think the need is to speed up the chain. Right now, there's too much focus on energy, if I may say so, and we need to focus more on the development of these new chemicals. They should be parallel. And the last challenge, okay, Katrina, is that my own sales force and my customers have to accept the new properties of the products, and maybe even the new ways of application. If they don't want it, it's very difficult to sell.
Thank you. A very, very important point. I'm keeping my eye on the clock. I mean, it's only to respect. Perhaps you can let me know if there's any audience. I won't hurry so much if we haven't, and we're covering lots of ground. Can I ask my lovely technical people behind the scenes to give us a nudge in the chat so I know? Klaus, okay, so here was the question. Developing the solutions is challenging. You said, hey, but it's an opportunity. So to help companies, to help, and science tools to be more competitive on the global market. But then you hear this. There were some very clear examples of the complexity there. So what do you think about that in terms of, yes, this will all help people to become more competitive?
Now it's me.
This time it's me saying to you.
Yeah. I really appreciate what has said by Marlies, for example, and also by Barbara. And firsthand, I think it's most about motivation. And if we have new products in terms also of new business models and new business, that's, I think, a good motivation, and people can't start to get inventive. Yeah. Though the goal is do less with better products. Do more with less products, I would say. And this also has an advantage, because then you are depending less on resources. If you need less to bring the same service to the market, there's less pollution in the environment. And people tell me also from industry, I also have children and I'm interested to contribute to a good future. Yeah? So also most of the tools we need are already available. Barbara has mentioned LCA, yes. Mighty tool, but also at the same time, very often just thinking a little bit about helps you. For example, coming back to one of the examples of Marlies or a similar one, if you go for polyethylene, polyethylene is a non-polar compound. So why using polar starting materials like bioresources? We should use fossil oil as long as it's not incinerated. So we have lots of opportunities to apply what we have learned or what we know from chemistry. And yeah, I would say the crazy ones of today are the realists of tomorrow. Yeah, we should give each other again more freedom to think the unthinkable, also in this direction, to be more unconventional. These are for me the most important tools and settings of the scene.
How does that, let me come to Marlies first. I mean, and then how does that resonate with you? When you hear there, listen, the crazy ones, we need to think in that highly imaginative way that, there is stuff out there. You need to do more with less products. What's your response? And you have to be competitive in a large market. You've already said at the beginning who you're competing with in terms of the big paint producers. So what about you and remaining competitive?
Well, I agree. It is a major challenge, but I love innovation and I love to beat my competitors, especially the big ones. And we have in our company an objective that we want to be a front runner in sustainable coatings and coating solutions. And I really believe that my type of company, medium-sized, is more free to do whatever it wants. Because if I want to try something new, I will try it. And if it costs money and it doesn't pay, my shareholders will not say, don't do it. So I can use more freedom to look for the cooperation with universities, with other raw material suppliers, to do joint innovations, to find the solutions so that I can have this competitive advantage compared to my big competitors.
Thank you. But it does take a lot of energy, doesn't it? Like you say, and some, cost. You have to be prepared to take some risks. You have to get the right actors around the table, not just at the beginning, but throughout. And you have to keep trying. But Barbara, presumably, when you say, it can be tricky for these smaller companies to have access to the right science, the right data, the right tools. But clearly you have in mind the fact that they want to remain competitive. So how do you see safe and sustainable by design fitting into that aim, EU remaining competitive on the global stage?
Well, I think that we are all in debt with the little companies and startup like the one of Marlies or startup in biotechnologies, because I recognize that they are pioneers, and pioneers comes with the cost and energies. And they are doing it for them, but for all of us too. But I also think that this will turn out into be the front runner. And so in competitiveness will pay back. And I see that finally, after decades of urgency on the topic, sustainability is finally becoming synonymous with high quality and healthiness. There is a rediscovery of concepts like slow, local, customized, of course, sustainable, rather than really industrialized and standardized production. Also, government programs like New European Bauhaus are really positively supporting this transition. And the only thing that can be seen as a big challenge will be really to encourage the demand for these sustainable products and materials, which are also innovative and for this reason have a higher price. But we need to make them accessible as many companies as possible, for many companies as possible. And also given this pandemic we are facing, I think this topic is really important for the next few years.
Indeed. Now I'm going to ask you, before I come to the last question, take a glance, and we've got, okay, I've got something from Klaus, so a question did come in. But I think when you say there, Barbara, obviously there is this rediscovery, there is this value. When I was talking on a panel and we were looking at the Sustainable Products Initiative, and the revision of eco-design coming up, there is still that thought amongst some that, how do you make sure that sustainable or more reused, recycled isn't seen as a poor relation? There is still, for me, that tipping point to go absolute. There is still, I think, with the consumer, and the consumer is so important in this, as Marlies rightly said. For sure, we are in that movement. For sure, there is awareness. Feels like there's still a way to go for me. Before we look at this question that's come in on the chat, and Klaus, you said, I mentioned several times sustainable chemistry, and you've put a link in there for our understanding of sustainable chemistry, which could also be useful for our audience. You and all of you, Marlies too, Barbara too, you've all said, this is also younger people play a key part in this, whether they're younger chemists, whether they're young people who are doing all the fabulous things in your business, Marlies, that you explained, and those that you are collaborating with and teaching, educating, Barbara. We do also have the demographic challenge in Europe, and we do have people also living longer, and they have to be part of this transition. So how do we balance all that and keep young people fired up, give them the tools, give them the possibility, give them the support and encouragement to carry this torch and rapidly? Klaus.
I think there is not this opposition, young against elderly. We see already it's a joint movement, it's a joint interest for different reasons. And we need education at all levels. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons, for example, why we recently developed extra occupational study courses, a Master of Science in Sustainable Chemistry addressing this interdisciplinary things, as well as an MBA in Sustainable Chemistry Management, because in industry you have both, not just chemists, you also have other managers, and we need all of them on board. Yeah, and I think that's important. The communication and transparency and fairness, I have learned, is very important to bring together all along the life cycle of products. And for sure, we need better chemistry based on better education, which results in better products. And again, interdisciplinarity, which allows you to look beyond pure chemistry and pure products, is an important point in this. And maybe I can close here with two quotes, one from Albert Einstein. A smart person solves a problem, a wise person avoids it. And from Max Planck, also a physicist, he said, new ideas are not successful because the young people the older people sticking to the old ideas are convinced, but because they daren't.
Oops, sorry. Thank you very much for that. We had a lot. God, am I still muted? No, I'm not. There we go. Thank you for that. Indeed, I don't at all see, and I don't think there should be any silos or anything in competition. I find it interesting to keep the enthusiasm going, because there's one thing being open to it, and you said there, Klaus, something very important. I have noticed that communication, transparency, credibility, all of that is tremendously important. Barbara, you must come across this, but once you have that, how do you sustain it through the challenges of actually implementing this? Because there's the awareness, there's the drive, and there's putting it into practice. So what do you think about keeping younger people carrying that torch and putting this into practice?
I think that involve them with a learning by doing approach is one of the best things a teacher can do. Actually, as a young designer, I would have never thought of teaching, but today I consider sharing my knowledge on sustainable design and material together with my students the more effective eco-design strategy that I can achieve. And I always try to involve them, or for example, make them criticizing material, even with new educational strategies like making DIY materials, etc. Right. And another thing is for future generation is the important to invest in research, even if there is no immediate economic return sometimes. I think that this should not be calculated as a failure for the present moment, but as an investment for future generation. And also about the silver economy, so about elderly people. Well, I think that sometimes they are even more wise than younger generation. So we need to also listen to them, because I always quote that the first Fab Lab in which I have been was the garage of my father. So let's also try to relearn something from the elderly.
Thank you. Well, maybe we can avoid elderly. Let's keep it at silver. That sounds that sounds quite nice. And I think you're absolutely right. Learning by doing, and keeping almost so that you don't even know into action, because you're doing so much. And I bet you're great to have as an educator. I bet you're fabulous. You're so committed. Such an important question for you, Marlies, this one, of course, because you are part of a family business that has been handed down the generations. So what does this mean for you, and where your company's going next, and who has to take up the mantle and carry on in this whole, well, that was the other question, revolution, evolution we find ourselves in?
Well, yeah, as you said, don't underestimate the power of family business, because they're all about next generations and the future. They're focused on a long-term survival of their companies. Profit is always a means, or always, most of the time, a means to an end. And continuation of the family business is key. And they really invest in innovations. Realize that the family business can and are willing to help in the green transition of industry and our economy. And this type of business should be in the new SME strategy of the EU. It's not in there, so this is a hint. Family business, in my opinion, is sustainable by nature. And if you talk about youth, if I look at new employees in my company, if you ask millennials now, they only want to work for you if you have purpose and want to make impact as a company. I see it every day when I have new people applying for jobs. They ask me questions about that. So I'm not sure if we have to teach them, but I think we have to teach in general. Take, for instance, the loss of biodiversity. I made a short animation video last year to explain what biodiversity is and what the loss causes to the environment, because only if you understand, you can take action. And I think my generation are the ones that makes decisions right now, and there are sure a lot of them that still need to be educated.
Absolutely, and I think you raise really important, because it's a lot. The theme of this year's Green Week is zero pollution, protecting biodiversity, human health, planet health. We have all sorts of things going on around the climate. We have alternative fuels. We have new forms of transport. We have mobility. There is a lot going on environmentally speaking. And I think you are right that the continuous need to unpack, to explain, and to involve by doing is absolutely critical. 3 questions, literally for 30-second answers. I don't mind if you can not wade in on any, you can wade in on some. So how to avoid replacing harmful in some way, sort of established chemicals with less well-known ones that might not in fact be any less harmful. That's a question. Then there's this issue of tax externalities so that we can provide, so what ways can we provide the right financial incentives? And how can we best interconnect safe and sustainable with the actual performance of industrial processes and the performance of chemicals produced? Klaus, do you want to take 1 or 2 of those?
Yes, my pleasure. As for the first one, was replacing harmful. First of all, avoiding instead of replacing. What do you need will make no harm. That's why I'm advocating for service thinking and service and business models. Yes, maybe you need still chemicals, but you need less. And at the same time, that gives you advantages in terms to become more independent of resources and to use less resources. Therefore, that's my starting point, starting with service and functions. And for the others, have a look at the life cycle, and then you see, will it go to the environment? Then it has to be biodegradable. That's part of our research, designing chemicals for environmental biodegradation. If they are circulated business to business, then make them as stable as possible. And in all cases, reduce, and each new chemical allows for a new patent. And that brings me to the next questions, incentives. Yes, we need legislation also, but also incentives. And if we prolong patent lifetime for such compounds we want to have, on the one hand, that's a huge incentive. And another one is maybe fast track authorization. If you can show from the very beginning a compound is very positive, I would say. And third of all, maybe we should not increase like this way. We should maybe increase this way, because then we can learn if there are non-anticipated bad outcomes, and we can stop early enough instead of being up here and it takes long time coming down here.
Okay, thank you very much. We just have a few more minutes before we close. So Marlies, Barbara, would you like to, let me give you the space. Yeah, absolutely, go ahead.
Now, I wanted to add one thing about externalities. I don't know about tax regulation and if they were effective, but as Klaus was suggesting, I think that avoid externalizing impacts of social and environmental entities is really important. And I think sometimes for designer and circular economy, the question is about, okay, what can I do with my waste? But no, how can you redesign the old system to avoid that waste, or maybe design since the beginning that you will not have a waste, but a big product that can go and flow in other cycle of production.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think it is, and I think also it's very important always at the heart of this, indeed, to talk about the waste hierarchy. And so indeed, it's not just, well, there is a sort of a possibility that right at the end we can indeed, and it's why it's so complex, because it's not, as you say, it's when we say safe and sustainable by design, of course it is from the outset, but it is so important to underline that it's through the whole life cycle. It's not just about, you know, getting it right at the beginning. As Klaus said, you need to be looking, you know, at all elements, asking the questions, checking out. Marlies, anything, you know, related to those questions, to the safe and sustainable performance of processes, or the performance particularly to keep your customers happy, that you might need to, that you would like to chip in there?
Yeah, I think there are 2 things. If you look at not replacing harmful by less harmful, it would be music in the ears of my R&D manager, because he loves to look in a different way to how to make paint, how to design paint in the future. And that's why I'm very proud of my R&D activity I have now in the north of the Netherlands. I started it 10 years ago. We now have a brand new laboratorium. We are nearby the university. We are in the bio-based hotspot of the Netherlands. And here we really try to work on sustainable solutions and paint-related solutions. So we work together also with raw material suppliers, but that's a longer period from now. So it will take time. And in the meantime, I have to run a company as well. So what we try now is work with these, the example I gave of these bio-based wall paints, for instance. And my problem there is, and then more connected to the text thing, is that if I want to do good, it is more expensive right now. I want to speed up this bio-based contents, so replace the materials for the time being. But it will be more costly and my customers just won't want to pay for it. So how can we try to do good and let people also accept it because they are not paying more than for the bad stuff, so to say. And that's a real challenge, which must be solved, I think, on European level.
Well, just let me stick with you because I've got the same question for literally a 2-sentence answer. So in the light of that, how do we encourage all of us, and I don't say people, I'm talking about myself too, and all of you, how do you encourage us in a way to buy less but higher quality, therefore pay more, which is a bit like Klaus was saying, to do less with more. So number one, what would be your one encouragement there, Marlies? How would you sell that? You know, pay more but buy less. And all of this, is it revolution or evolution? Same question to all of you, short answer. How do you get people to buy but better quality? And is all of this revolution or evolution?
But buy less high quality, we already do that with our sulfur-based lacquers.
No, you do, but how do you get the public? We've got 3 minutes. Anyone can... We have
upgraded our sulfur-based lacquers from 6 year until a 12-year cycle of paint.
Right.
And they don't want to paint very often, so they are prepared to pay a little bit more to pay less times. That's one example.
And for you, revolution or evolution?
It looks like evolution, but I think we need a revolution.
Brilliant, thank you. Klaus, to you.
Yeah, I think
one sentence on changing habits, consumer habits, and revolution or evolution.
Teach all of us appreciation of what we have and what it costs to get it, and then we will deal differently with it. It's not everything just available. Everything, there's a certain cost. And as for revolution and evolution, I think both depends on this time scale and it depends of the topic. And we have to learn what's needed when. And sometimes it just happens.
Yeah, interesting. And when you say teach about that, the value of what comes to you, I think what we try and do very much in the EU is from farm to fork. We try and do that very much because it's something that's very, you taste it, you touch it, you smell it, you see it in everyday life. And it's something that particularly, I think there is with younger generations, you can more easily do. So it's that kind of philosophy, but with other products, because you can't see chemicals, can you? Barbara, they're in our everyday life. You can't see them. So teaching us the value of all of those different cycles, how we come to have things. Barbara, very last brief from you. How do we encourage people to consume perhaps better, but less? Revolution or evolution?
I think from a design perspective, designers should work on enhancing emotional attachment to objects, and then the final user needs to repair their object and accept their changing in time, even concerning its surface, its material. There are materials that can change and age gracefully and be appreciated for that.
Okay, and last word to you. I've been told we have to cut early, so last word to you. Revolution, evolution?
I think a revolution in behavioral change will be the basis of a successful evolution in the existing economic model.
Thank you. You have all been absolutely fantastic. Everybody must be going away with brains full. There you go. They've cut us early. So I don't know why.